most significant challenge encountered in this investigation has been the 24-hour news cycle and its insatiable appetite for something, for anything, to talk about, following closely behind with the nonstop rumors on social media. On August 9th, Michael Brown was shot and killed by police officer Darren Wilson. Within minutes, various accounts of the incident began appearing on social media, accounts filled with speculation and little, if any, solid, accurate information. Almost immediately, neighbors began gathering and anger began growing because of the various descriptions of what had happened and because of the underlying tension between the police department and a significant part of the neighborhood.
Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm John Dales in for Adrian Batra. Well, I'm not going to deny when that announcement was being made by prosecutor Bob McCullough. I was on this thing right here, and it was going fast and furious, and people were saying, a lot of my colleagues, look, he's blaming the media, he's blaming the media. Well, there's the question for you. Sarah McIntyre, Marissa Semke joining us. Not just the media, but social media as well. Twitter was ablaze and has been for months now on this issue. Is it fair to say, though, that people speculate and that has an impact? It has an impact on the court of public opinion. Marissa, I'll ask you.
Well, I think absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what he said. I don't necessarily think it's exclusively to blame, but it certainly played a role in perpetuating a narrative that people wanted to see perpetuated. I mean, Twitter served as an arena for people to analyze other people's second guessings. Immediately when this happened, there were people that took to social media. They started tweeting things out that they had heard from other people. So there was this, a lot of false information that was being spread as a result. One of the things we heard was that Michael Brown was shot in the back. That turned out to be false. So I think absolutely Twitter played a role in perpetuating a false narrative.
Sarah?
No, I actually disagree because I think, we talk about this a lot, slacktivism, which is basically you do something on your iPhone, you put it down and that's it. Actually going out into the street and protesting and facing police and rioting requires active participation. It requires decision. It requires you to be mobilized and angry enough to actually not just put something on Twitter and hit send, but to actually get ready, go outside and be angry. So I think
it's tough to do, though, if you're 2,000 kilometers away.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that, well, then how can you then at the same time say social media is to blame for the protests? Well, that's my point. My point is that it's not just, he glazed over the fact that the underlying tensions between the police department and the community, and he says really social media is to blame. And I think that it had a role to play in what was inaccurate. I think that you actually have to look at the history to show why people were upset about the decision, and that it was completely predictable that people would be out in the streets and protesting with a decision not to go to trial.
I think the misinformation that was spread on social media, and again, it's not exclusively to blame, but the misinformation that was spread on social media obviously has an impact on the criminal investigation. Thank God we have these grand juries that are able to sift through that information in a very productive way, such that they can get to the truth. But ultimately, this misinformation, especially in a case that is so racially charged as the one that happened in Ferguson, of course it had a role to play.
Well, keep in mind,
it doesn't actually get people out of their chairs and
not
into the street
necessarily,
protesting.
but I think the argument is you've got people who are in Missouri, who are in the St. Louis area, who can be there, and they are being fed all this information.
All they needed to hear was not to proceed with a trial, and they were going to be protesting.
But
that's it.
If the more information they're fed, whether it's accurate or not, is that not likely to play a role as to whether or not they get off their sofa and go out there and join the front lines?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps, but I think all they needed to hear was a decision from the prosecutor that there wasn't going to be a trial, and they would have been off their sofa and into the streets.
But when you're spreading a piece of information such as Michael Brown was shot in the back, then it sounds like he was running away from the officer, that there wasn't a physical altercation, and that is a reason for people to get off their couch and think, wait a minute, this actually is a situation in which race played a role in it.
Well,
and I think that is something that...
I think you're overestimating the facts here. I think people felt that there's racial tensions there, that it was racially motivated, that regardless of what the facts were going to be presented, the fact that there wasn't going to be a trial was going to be a reason enough for them to get into the streets.
But why did they take that position in the first place?
Was it social media?
I'll tell you, I was on the air. I was on radio last night when this came across. We were getting text messages from people making statements that were simply not true, things that had not been provided as actual testimony. So you've got to believe that erroneous information being spread across Twitter or wherever it is does have an impact. And look at these people texting me to let their feelings be known.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you went and interviewed people that were protesting that would say, oh, I did it because Twitter told me to. No, they did it because there wasn't a trial. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that were out there vandalizing, that were actually using the tensions and using the anger from the community to go in and vandalize and loot stores and vendors in the region that actually had nothing to do with legitimate protest.
No, and I don't disagree. I just think that Twitter, because of how accessible it is for information to be spread out there, or for information to be spread and to get out there, almost serves to really charge people emotionally.
Well, it's throwing fuel on the fire.
Absolutely.
But the fire already exists. That's my point.
But
the fire was we're not having a trial.
Okay, let me ask you.
Fire.
A lot of us, while on Twitter last night, were also watching live on different networks. And I couldn't help but think, if you weren't there, I know they have a job to do, but if you weren't there as a reporter providing a venue for these people to act up, maybe we wouldn't have as much in the way of people showing off and breaking things and setting them on fire.
I don't think it was about showing off last night. It was about, there's two types of things. People that were really angry about the decision, felt that justice wasn't going to be served, and that we're going to take to the streets regardless of Twitter, regardless of whether a reporter was there. They were going to take to the streets because they felt that there was a social injustice going on. Whether that's true or factual or whatever is still to be determined, I think. And secondly, you had these people that are just like, the professional protesters that come in and they use the situation of unrest in order to go in and loot and riot and set things on fire, which are a bunch of, general young hooligans. Those are two different groups of people going out for two different purposes. Would it have happened if Twitter didn't exist? Yes, absolutely.
A CNN reporter was hit over the head on live TV with a rock. Was there actual malice behind that, do you think, Marissa, in terms of, are they going after the media? Are they targeting the media because they think the story's not being told properly?
I don't know. I can't speculate on that because I don't know if that CNN reporter was caught in the crossfire or not. But what I do know is these people were obviously very angry last night, as evidenced by the fact that they were burning down Little Caesars joints. They were burning down a number of buildings. I mean, we had tear gas being thrown, violence against police officers. Obviously these people were incredibly upset. Whether or not that CNN reporter, whether or not it was malice and they were going after the media, I can't speculate on that sort of thing.
Well, and this is the thing, you say they're upset, and I heard that narrative from a lot of people as well. I have trouble buying that I think the people who were upset were the ones who were part of the peaceful protest, who were angry, and we saw them on the news, but they weren't setting things on fire. I think we're quick to draw a conclusion that they're burning down buildings, so they must be upset about the verdict. I don't know if I'm buying that one.
No, I think there's individuals, no matter where you are, where they're going to take advantage of unrest in a certain area in order to do things and destroy property and set things on fire because they're young kids and they have nothing better to do. It happens all the time. It happened in the G20 protest. There was a peaceful protest and there was a gang of thugs that wanted to go and set things on fire. They happened in the Stanley Cup riots in Vancouver. Was that because of Twitter? No, it was because people were drunk and on the streets and the police didn't do their job.
I just think it doesn't help that you've got Al Sharpton out there whipping everyone into a frenzy.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think that's relevant, though, to this discussion of whether or not social media is to blame. This would have happened whether social media was around or not, even if we had technology or not. Protests, particularly racial protests in the U.S., happen when there is a decision by a criminal institution that people feel is disruptive and is perpetuating a social injustice.
Difference between a protest and a riot. And trust me, I'm from Montreal. I know riots are people, when they're happy, when the Stanley Cup, they riot. So there you go. We're going to come